Hello everyone, this is RaySpace. Recently I've posted videos on getting to another star system without warp drives using the advanced engines from the KSP Interstellar mod, and in this video I'm going to start tackling getting around the solar system quickly with less technologically intensive engines from the mod, and I'll get to far future tech as well later on, but for this video we're just sticking to fission engines from the KSP Interstellar pack, and we're starting with the nuclear Lightbulb. That is a closed cycle gas core engine. Your normal nuclear thermal rocket engines like NERVA are solid core engines, and they are also closed cycle, which means they're not spewing out any of the radioactive stuff. This one is closed cycle as well, but a gas core. In order to contain the gas core, it has little quartz crystals. It's complicated, so it contains the gaseous stuff in those crystals. They have to be able to take very high temperatures because as a gas core it's very hot, and so it'll be very difficult to make such a thing. However, you get 3,500 seconds of ISP out of it if you can do it. And so that leads us to be able to get to other planets much faster than we would be able to with the NERVA, though potentially about the same as we would be able to with ion engines. So this is the lowest level, the closest to our current technology that we've got in the KSP Interstellar pack as far as something that's still more advanced than NERVA or some other NTP or ions. 3,500 would be pushing ions a little bit, and I discovered that I could probably get to Mars in 2 months. Normal transit time is 6 to 9 months, mostly 9 months. And we packed 40,000 meters per second, and in order to get to Mars in 2 months, we're talking about 10,000 meters per second to get there. The capture is a few thousand. Altogether, it's going to end up being about 40,000 because getting back is also another 10,000 if we want to do it in 2 months. You could come back slower. That's always an option. But for 2 months, you're talking about 10,000 to get there, whereas for the 6 to 9 month option, you're talking about 4,000 to get there. So it's a big difference in terms of delta V to get there, and then also a lot more to slow down. So that's the rub. And then any amount that you want to try and speed it up, it's going to be worse. So you can see here that the amount to capture is 8,641. It's right now reading that we have 25,000. I come back a little slower than originally intended. I originally intended to come back in 45 days, and that would take about 20,000. Because this got to take 8,000 and we only have 25,000 left because of certain inaccuracies during the burn out to here. It's always tough to do really big burns at Earth, unless you're starting at a really high orbit, so I had issues with that. But yeah, as a result, I decided to go back in 2 months as well instead of 45 days. Getting back to Earth is usually a little bit easier than leaving Earth. So here I am plotting the trip back. And part of the reason why it's a little bit easier is I stayed in a high orbit instead of capturing into a low orbit around Mars. But with some refinements and practice, I probably would have been able to get into a low orbit around Mars with this. But the exit out is 8,700 as opposed to 10,000. This is the burn back to Earth. So this is all we're testing. We're trying to get to different planets quickly and come back. And so this engine is 40,000 meters per second altogether. The reason I picked that is because with 3,500 seconds of ISP that we have there, we are looking at an optimal amount of delta V from this stage of about 35,000 meters per second. That's how it works. I could explain why, but that takes extra math. But it's about the same as the exhaust velocity, which is about 10 times the specific impulse. So 35,000 is what I was looking for to get out of it. I shaded it a little bit higher, 40,000, and that's what we're doing. But that means that if we've got better engines, we'll get more delta V out of an optimal stage, and we can go to other places faster. Also, they could get to Mars faster, but the faster you go, the worse it gets pretty darn quickly. So yeah, we'll see some of that later on in this sequence of videos where I examine all these things. So we're capturing around Earth. One of the beneficial things is that we've consumed some of the food, water, and oxygen along the way. We did stay a little while over at Mars, so it's still a 2-year and 200-day trip. Actually, I think we left on day 75 or something like that. So we stayed at Mars for a normal amount of time before coming back. So they consumed some of the food, water, and oxygen, but nowhere near all of it. The payload mass on this vessel was about 200 tons, including the food, water, and oxygen going out there. And our launch mass, well, not our launch mass, it depends. The mass of the vessel going out to Mars was about 2,800 tons. So that is the situation. I'm going to keep the vessel masses to about 3,000 tons because that's the capacity of our Monument launcher, which, well, we'll get to that. But here we have the liquid core reactor engine. That wasn't as good as the gaseous core closed cycle. So actually I missed a step up from NERVA. Technically the liquid core one is a step up from NERVA. That's a little bit better, but it's not that much better to make it worthwhile. Here I've put on the open cycle gas core nuclear engine, and that actually does spew out radiation. So you don't want that anywhere near Earth really. And here we're getting 76,000 meters per second, and that's because the ISP of this is 7,000. So it's twice the efficiency as the closed cycle one. And I'm trying to figure out what we can do with this. I decided Jupiter is undershooting a bit. I wanted to go to Saturn, and I ultimately decided that maybe, given how the pork chop plot looked there, maybe, well, 1 year is a little bit too fast. 54,000 meters per second is too much because we've only got 76,000. That's 54,000 to transfer and capture, which means we're expecting 54,000 back. So 108,000 altogether. Here, to get there in a year and a half, we take 34,000. And so 34,000 times 2 is 68,000. I decided that was doable with 76,000 meters per second. So that's what I went for. 1.5 year journey to Saturn, which is great compared to the normal transfer, which is about 7 years, could be longer. So we're cutting that down by quite a lot, which means less consumption of the food, water, and oxygen. We're actually carrying like 13 years worth for 4 people. So if we're going there in 1.5 years, that means we could host many more passengers over to Saturn. But what I noticed, you can see that the delta V is going down there. And so this open cycle engine has a reduction in the specific impulse as we go along due to the heat. And there it's hitting 1,300, which is horrible. And now we've only got 14,000 meters per second. We can't deal with that. So there's a huge diminishment in the efficiency of the engine as we get more waste heat, at least, or that's what it seemed like. And then once we shut it down and it cools down, it seemed to get some of that back. It didn't completely track the specific impulse during time warp. Once you come out of time warp, it updates that. But the delta V reading gets updated all the time. So now we're back up to 74,000, but we're not exactly up to where we were initially. We're at 7,000 to start off with. And then once I throttle up, well, at low throttle, it has low ISP. And once you throttle up all the way, it gets its better ISP. So we see 3,000 there when I'm at low throttle, but actually if I throttle up, it'd be better. But there is some degradation thing going on with this open cycle engine, and there we see that it does actually prevent us from blowing the exhaust at Earth's atmosphere. It will prevent that. And now, if you're wondering whether we're deorbiting the nuclear exhaust, we aren't, but you can't have it aimed at the atmosphere, which will slow it down. But the normal exhaust velocity is 70,000 meters per second, so that's shooting to escape in the opposite direction. So it'll not only go through deorbiting, but actually go on escape in the opposite direction. So it'll be clear of Earth as long as you don't hit the atmosphere. So, since we have this degradation with the heat, I decided to, of course, add more radiators, but it was weird because the thermal mechanics helper didn't seem to read any reduction in our temperature, the radiator resting temperature, when I added more radiators, even when I added extras on top. It's kept it to 3,600 Kelvin. So I decided, well, I guess I have to reduce the size of the engine, right? If you can't get more cooling, you need to reduce the amount of heat. That does make our burn time like 21 hours, but of course I'm going to be adding Pekka's module onto it, the warp module, so that I can do warp thrust while it is on. But then I resized the radiators again, and then it suddenly started saying 2,200 Kelvin, which is still really hot. But these titanium radiators can potentially deal with that. So I sized it back up again because, well, I still don't like the long burn time. Mainly I don't like the long burn time because it makes getting away from Earth more inconvenient, especially if you're in a low orbit. Now, with the properties of this engine stopping us from continuing when we're pointed at the atmosphere, we might not want to be in low orbit. But as long as you tilt down like I have here, it's all right, because then the tail end is pointed away from Earth. So you can exaggerate that a little bit more with some planning. But anyway, with the additional, I increased the size of the radiators a little bit, but it still had degradation of a specific impulse. You can see the delta V going down there, so that's not working out. And ultimately, I am going to have to decrease the size of the engine and deal with the fact that we're going to have a longer stage time, and probably slap on some more radiators as well. I'm not willing to go beyond having titanium radiators right now. There is a graphene option in KSP Interstellar. I'm not doing that yet because we're sort of going with more accessible technology. Graphene's a little bit hard when it comes to actually making radiators of it. Titanium, I sort of believe. But anyway, we're not getting enough cooling for this engine, that's for sure. So I'll continue examining various options for various planets in the solar system to cut down our travel time in subsequent videos, and analyzing those. And after I get through some more of the KSP Interstellar options, I'll also do far future as well. And we are going to make sure that people can get to other planets much better than they have been, so that real solar system maybe is not so daunting. Well, we'll see. So with that, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do press like. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.